Much. Megan Patterson there in southeast London, and I'm joined now by the Venerable Alastair Cutting, who's Archdeacon of Lewisham and Greenwich, and has been in contact with those organising the vigil for Sabina tonight. And Archdeacon, thank you very much for joining us on BBC News. How important do you think this opportunity will be for people to express their grief and indeed their outrage over what has happened to Sabina?
I think these events are really, really important. Through my ministry over the years, I've been involved in a number of sudden and tragic deaths. And I was particularly moved by this one with the echoes with my previous colleague, Archdeacon Mina Smallman, whose two daughters were murdered in London last year. And there's some echoes about a young woman being found in a park that are very, very vibrant for me in this particular context. The local community, there's a couple of vigils actually going on tonight. There's one starting at 6:15 at St James Church, the local parish church for this particular community in Kidbrooke. And there's a chance to light candles and to say some prayers within the safe space of the church context there. And then in the community at Kidbrooke Village itself, at Pegler Square tonight at 7 p.m, there's going to be the wider community vigil. It's very much a community vigil, this one, coordinated by local people like Annie and Andy, who put it together. It's been picked up in a more wider context by Reclaim Those Streets and whatnot, who are wanting to support this as well. But there's a really strong feeling locally of wanting to make people feel that they can be safe within our communities.
And you mentioned the sisters Biba Henry and Nicole Smallman, and they were together when they were killed. Sabina was on her own. You know, the sisters we're told, aren't we, you know, try and move around in company. But how do you, as a man of God, how do you try to make sense of this? How do you try to help people to make sense of this? And how do you send out a message to women when, you know, women are not the problem here? This is violence perpetrated by men.
This is a real concern for us. And actually, you mentioned just in the bit that Megan was saying just a moment ago about OneSpace. OneSpace is a local charity community centre run by mainly local Christians from the local churches who are involved in running this. And part of its work is to work with the youth, the young women and the young men of the community. We're often saying we need to tackle these things with the youngsters. Well, here's a community centre that's doing just that, and ironically it's one that's likely to lose its place as the wider development around Kidbrooke Village continues. And I think community ventures like this OneSpace are really vital for helping us to try and engage with young people. There's lots of sports activities that go on at OneSpace at the moment, and the Christian ethos of that little community centre is part of what tries to help people to engage. The Christian faith is partly based on a God whose son Jesus came to earth and died. A father losing a son is at the heart of part of what the Christian faith is all about. So I think there's something where faith can sometimes help touch for people who are struggling in these sorts of circumstances.
What is the role for men here as we look at the murder of Sabina, as we look at the other murders of women that have happened? What is the role for men here? What do they need to do to step up to play their part in making life safer for everyone?
I think that's a really important question. With this case, we don't know yet. We don't know who the murderer was, and we can't preempt that at this stage. But we know from so many other murders that actually it is men that have done that. I was in a Zoom call last night with a local MP, and he pulled together a number of community activists. And one of the specific things that was mentioned there by another community activist was, how can we help our members of our community, the men and the women, to actually speak out when they see things that aren't right, and some links to some training that can be done, and the whole business of trying to make sure that we look out for one another. To bear one another's burdens is a great biblical theme. So you're absolutely right about this, and we continue with it in our education, in our schools. There's some great local schools, and there's some great work the police are doing with the schools. There's community liaison officers attached to each individual school to try to engage with these particular issues at a practical level.
Thank you very much for your time today. The Venerable Alastair Cutting, Archdeacon of Lewisham and Greenwich.